Imagine having $50 billion in the bank and a girl on your arm who looks like she stepped off a Vogue cover. For Elias Thorne, that wasn't a dream. It was Tuesday. But Elias had a problem that money couldn't solve. He was terrified that the woman he loved, Clara, didn't love him. She loved the private jets. She loved the penthouse overlooking Manhattan. She loved the black Amex that never hit a limit. So Elias decided to do something insane, something that would either prove Clara was his soulmate or shatter his heart into a million pieces. He wasn't taking her to Paris for their anniversary. He wasn't buying her another diamond choker. Instead, he drove her 3 hours into the middle of nowhere, stopped the car in front of a rotting gray shack with boarded-up windows, and told her, "Clara, I lost it all. Everything is gone. This is our new home." What she did next, it didn't just leave him speechless. It changed the course of his life forever. Stick around, because this isn't your typical rich guy meets poor girl story. The ending has a twist that nobody, not even Elias, saw coming. To understand why Elias was so paranoid, you have to understand where he came from. He wasn't born with a silver spoon. He grew up in the foster system, scraping for every cent. By 30, he built a tech empire that revolutionized global logistics. He was the logistics king. But in the world of high finance, he was a shark who'd been bitten too many times. His last girlfriend had tried to sue him for half his company after 6 months of dating. The one before that, she was caught selling photos of his private home to the tabloids. By the time he met Clara at a charity gala, Elias was armored in cynicism. But Clara was different. She was a kindergarten teacher with a smile that felt like real sunshine, not the filtered kind you see on Instagram. They'd been together for a year, and every moment felt perfect. Too perfect. "She's too good to be true," his head of security, Marcus, would warn him. "Nobody is that selfless, boss. Not when there's $1 billion inheritance on the line." The seed of doubt grew into a forest. Elias began to see signs everywhere. When she admired a painting, he thought she was checking the appraisal value. When she kissed him, he wondered if she was tasting the champagne he'd just bought. He needed to know. He needed the stress test. He spent 2 weeks setting the stage. He moved his assets into protected trusts, redirected his mail, and rented the most dilapidated, soul-crushing house he could find in rural West Virginia. He even traded his custom Lamborghini for a rusted 2004 sedan that smelled like wet dog and old cigarettes. The Friday of their anniversary, he didn't show up in a tuxedo. He showed up in a stained hoodie, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. "Clara," he whispered, his voice cracking, half from acting, half from the sheer terror of what he was about to do. "The SEC, the investments, it's all gone. They froze the accounts. They took the house. I'm bankrupt." Clara didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just gripped his hand. "Elias, are you okay? Are you in trouble?" "I'm broke, Clara. I have nothing left but a few $1,000s I hid in a shoebox and a property my grandfather left me in the hills. We have to leave. Now, before the press finds us." Without a single question about her jewelry, her clothes, or her future, Clara packed a single duffel bag. She walked away from the life of luxury without looking back once. But the real test was only just beginning. The drive was silent. The further they got from the city lights, the more the reality sank in. When they finally pulled up to the house, even Elias felt a pang of guilt. It was worse than the photos. The porch was sagging, the roof was missing shingles, and the air smelled of damp earth and neglect. "Home sweet home," Elias said, his voice dripping with fake bitterness. He watched her eyes, waiting for the flicker of disgust, waiting for the "I can't do this" speech. Clara stepped out of the car. Her designer heels sank into the mud. She looked at the shack, then at the overgrown weeds, and then back at Elias. "It's got character," she said softly. For the next 3 days, Elias pushed the limits. He told her there was no hot water. He turned off the heater. He told her they'd have to eat canned beans and cheap bread because they had to save every penny. He even accidentally broke the screen on her phone so she couldn't call for a ride out of there. He expected her to snap. He expected her to wait until he was asleep, hitchhike to the nearest station, disappear back to her comfortable life. Instead, Clara rolled up her sleeves. On Saturday, she found an old broom and swept the entire house. On Sunday, she used her own silk scarf to plug a drafty hole in the window frame. She hummed while she cooked those miserable beans over a camping stove. She made jokes about how rustic their new life was. But it was Monday night when the turning point really hit. Elias was sitting on a moth-eaten sofa, staring at the floor, feeling like the biggest villain in the world. He was about to come clean. He was about to tell her it was all a ruse, that a helicopter was waiting 10 miles away to take them to a private island. Then he saw Clara sitting at the small, cracked wooden table. She was writing in a notebook. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Budgeting," she said, not looking up. "I've been looking at the local school district. They need a substitute teacher. If I start next week and you find work at that hardware store in town, we can fix the roof by winter. It's going to be hard, Elias, but we're together. That's the only part that matters." Elias felt a lump in his throat. She wasn't just staying. She was planning a future in the dirt with him. She was willing to trade galas for hardware stores. "Clara," Elias started, his voice thick with emotion. "I have to tell you something. This isn't—" Suddenly, a heavy knock echoed through the house. It wasn't a normal knock. It was the sound of a fist hitting wood with the authority of the law. Elias froze. He hadn't planned for visitors. Marcus, his head of security, was supposed to keep everyone away. The door burst open before Elias could reach it. 3 men in dark suits stepped into the cramped, dim room. They didn't look like the fake SEC agents Elias had considered hiring for the prank. These men were cold, they were professional, and they were armed. "Elias Thorne?" the lead man asked. He had a scar running through his eyebrow and eyes like flint. "Who are you? This is private property," Elias snapped, his billionaire persona instinctively taking over. The man ignored him. He looked at the rundown room with a smirk. "Nice touch, Elias, the pauper act. We've been following you since you left Manhattan. We thought you were heading for a private airstrip to flee the country. Instead, you brought us here. Much more secluded." Clara stood up, moving behind Elias. "What do you want? He told you he has no money. He's bankrupt." The lead man laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Bankrupt? Honey, your boyfriend is worth $50 billion. He just moved $2 billion into a liquid offshore account 48 hours ago. We've been hired to make sure that money changes hands." Elias's blood ran cold. This wasn't part of the test. Someone had leaked his movements. Someone knew he was vulnerable, away from his security detail, tucked away in a house with no cell service and no neighbors. "I'll give you whatever you want," Elias said, stepping in front of Clara. "Just let her go. She has nothing to do with this." "Oh, we're not letting anyone go," the man said, pulling a silenced pistol from his jacket. "See, the client doesn't want a ransom. They want a vacancy. A tragic accident in a remote shack. A billionaire and his girlfriend, overcome by a gas leak. Very sad." The man leveled the gun at Elias's chest. Elias closed his eyes, leaning back to shield Clara with his own body. He'd spent his whole life testing her loyalty, only to lead her into a death trap. The irony was a bitter pill. He braced for the sound of the shot. Thwack! It wasn't a gunshot. It was the sound of something heavy hitting bone. Elias opened his eyes to see the lead gunman crumpled on the floor. Clara was standing over him, holding the heavy iron frying pan she'd been using to cook those cheap beans. The other 2 men lunged. What happened next was a blur of violence. Clara didn't scream. She didn't cower. She moved with a terrifying, fluid precision. She dodged a punch, grabbed the second man's arm, and snapped it with a sickening pop before driving her knee into his solar plexus. The third man reached for his weapon, but Clara was faster. She swept his legs, pinned him to the rotting floorboards, and applied a pressure point to his neck that sent him into instant unconsciousness. In less than 60 seconds, 3 professional hitmen were incapacitated. Elias stared at his kindergarten teacher girlfriend. She wasn't breathing hard. She wasn't shaking. She reached down, calmly picked up the lead man's fallen pistol, cleared the chamber, and tucked it into the waistband of her yoga pants. "Clara?" Elias whispered, his brain struggling to process the scene. "What? How did you—" Clara turned to him. The sweet sunshine smile was gone. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and incredibly sharp. "The test is over, Elias," she said. Her voice had dropped an octave. The soft, melodic tone was replaced by something clinical. Elias backed away, hitting the wall of the shack. "Who are you? Are you with them?" "With them?" Clara scoffed, looking at the unconscious men on the floor. "These amateurs? Please. They're bottom-tier mercenaries hired by your board of directors. They wanted to stage a hostile takeover by removing the CEO. I've been intercepting their communications for months." "You've been— what?" Clara sighed, looking around the miserable room. "Elias, did you really think a man in your position could just meet a beautiful, unattached woman at a gala by accident? I wasn't there for the charity. I was there for you." "You're a gold digger," Elias breathed, the old fear returning. "No," Clara corrected him, stepping closer. "I'm a private security consultant. Or, if you want the industry term, a shadow guardian. Your sister hired me. She knew you were becoming paranoid. She knew you were making yourself a target with this loyalty test nonsense. She hired my firm to make sure that while you were playing poor man in the woods, you didn't actually end up dead." Elias was reeling. "So, the last year? Dates? The school teaching? It was all an act?" Clara paused. For a second, the cold mask flickered. She looked at the notebook on the table, the one where she'd been budgeting for their future. "The job was an act, Elias," she said quietly. "But the beans? I actually liked the beans." She pulled a satellite phone from a hidden pocket in her duffel bag, the bag he thought only had clothes in it. She dialed a number. "Package is secure. We have 3 hostiles down at the secondary location. Send the extraction team, and bring a real car. I'm done with the sedan." She hung up and looked at Elias, who was still standing in the middle of the room, speechless. "You wanted to test my loyalty, Elias," Clara said, walking toward the door. "But you were testing the wrong thing. You were looking for a woman who would stay with you if you were poor. You should have been looking for the person who was keeping you alive while you were rich." She stepped out onto the porch, the moonlight catching the steel of the gun in her waistband. "Wait," Elias called out. Is there any us left after this? Or was it just a contract?" Clara stopped. She didn't turn around. "Check your shoebox of hidden cash, Elias," she said. She walked into the tree line just as the distant thrum of a helicopter began to shake the house. Elias ran to the shoebox he'd hidden under the floorboards. He tore it open. The few $1,000s he'd put there were gone. In their place was a single handwritten note and a small high-tech tracking chip. The note read, "I knew about the test the moment we left Manhattan. I let you play your game because it was the only way to get you to this safe house. But here's the twist, Elias. Your sister didn't hire me. I don't work for your board, and I don't work for your family." Elias turned the note over. On the back was a seal he recognized, the insignia of a global shadow organization that specialized in wealth redistribution. "I've been draining your offshore accounts for the last 48 hours while you watched me sweep the floor. You wanted to know if I'd stay if you were broke? Well, now you're actually broke. Let's see if you can handle the rustic life for real. Goodbye, Elias. Thanks for the beans." Elias ran to the window. The helicopter wasn't a rescue team. It was a transport. And as it rose above the trees, he saw Clara standing in the open doorway, blowing him a kiss before disappearing into the night. The logistics king was left alone in a rotting shack in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a frying pan and a hole in the roof. He had passed his own test, but he had failed hers.